You should have the payment processing admin role. You can also get to Checkscan from a couple of other different pages in Voyager as well. But here, the first place we're going to go to is the Checkscan dashboard. And I'm just leaving this wide open so we can just see all of our batches. So there's a lot of different combinations you can use on the Checkscan dashboard, depending on what you're exactly looking for. I'm going to briefly go through some of the options, but I think most of them are pretty point blank of a describing of what the filters mean. But let's go ahead and go through a few just to make sure we're all on a good page with this dashboard. So here we can filter by the batch, which is what I'm showing the example here, where we see our batch numbers on the left side. We can see our status date, if they're posted, if their attention required, the date they were scanned in, and that batch amount. We can also just select this by property. This is going to give me a different bird's eye view because I'm only going to see one. I scan to the same property all the time. I'm just one property manager, so to speak, and that's the only property I scan to, but I can see the total amount. You notice I'm not using any date filters. Next one is not associated. This is a good filter to use. If you have items that are not associated in Checkscan, you have items that are not posted, which means the money's not going to the bank. The whole point of check scanning is creating receipt batches, posting those batches, and moving the money to the bank, right? So come on in here and use the filter, flag it for not associated. This automatically changes your batch status to attention required. Once we click on submit, we're going to be able to see what batches need some attention. Here's my batch number right here. I can drill down right into this batch, come into the Checkscan interface. Now, as you can see on the dashboard, it's not assigned to a property. This is super important to understand. You don't know what property it goes to. So if you're a property manager that's overseeing multiple properties, you're going to have to kind of come into this batch and look at it and see what has been associated, what hasn't been associated. But there's been one check in here that hasn't been associated to anything. That's why we're not showing a property. Keep that thought. So I've got 2 checks associated, but one that's not. So I'm going to close this out real quick. Because when you're filtering on the dashboard, this is the big question we get all the time on support is, how do I find my batch? Or where did my batch go? It was there, and now I can't find it. So if you are helping one of your coworkers or one of your property managers, and Vicki is out trying to help Beverly. Beverly's the one who scanned in that batch. Vicki needs to make sure that she unflags the My Batches. Do not use a property because we can already tell that we doesn't filter for a property. If I was to put a property in here and click submit, I'm not going to get that because still we have a check in there that's not assigned to a property. So you're telling the Checkscan dashboard at this point, I only want to see non-associated that has checks for this particular property assigned. So delete that property filter out, leave this wide open. Definitely use your date filters when you start scanning and you have more and more receipt batches to review, and use that. So leave that filter empty. Details. I like using details because that actually opens up this filter here for receipt control from. When you're looking for just a direct check scan receipt, you can just go ahead and put in that control number to and from to find that information. We can go ahead and click on submit. We'll leave it wide open. The point of this is you will probably see this on your dashboard. This comment is okay. There's nothing wrong with this batch. The comment is an error in reporting. You have different batch statuses that you can review. Scanning in progress, attention required, ready to post, posted. Just change this back to batch is what I would go to, looking for attention required. Once again, I'm leaving my property filter empty because I'm overseeing multiple properties, and I want to make sure that all my properties are getting their Checkscan batches posted so that we know that money's coming to the bank. So use the dashboard overseeing, make sure that everything is getting posted, especially when your end users are just beginning check scanning. If they just started in April, or maybe they just started in May, just go back through, like I said, leave the date filters open, and let's make sure that we don't have anything attention required that should have been posted for the first part of May. What is nice when you do have attention required here is you can just simply click right on the batch number to take you directly into the Checkscan interface. That's just really super nice. I'm going to show an example of the different colors in Checkscan real quick when you're inside the Checkscan interface. As you can see here, we have red, green, and yellow. Those are three. We also have blue. But I just want to go over this real quick so that we have a good understanding of what's going on when your end users are actually scanning checks. When they have a red color coded box, it's letting your end users know that check has not been associated. The routing and account number has not been assigned to a resident. Green is letting you know that that check has been associated to a resident and that all charges are being paid off by that single check item. The other example there is yellow, or maybe you call it banana yellow. That's letting you know that that check has been associated, but it's either going to prepay or there's still some outstanding charges left on that tenant's ledger. The last color we have is blue. It's not shown here, but blue is letting you know that that check has been associated to 2 or more key codes, like a personal check. Example of that would be like a multi-tenant receipt, where you would have a parent possibility, have 2 children in 2 separate units, and you take a check and you split that check into 2 different amounts. Or maybe you have more units, maybe it's a larger check, but we call that multi-tenant. And if that check is a personal check, we go ahead and assign that to both T codes. And then when you scan that check in, it automatically comes up blue, and the system asks you which residence you want to assign it to. So the dashboard can be really helpful. Another one of my favorite examples that I like to talk about is residents will say, you know, I gave you my rent check in May, but I haven't seen it processed out of my bank, and here we are on the 17th. Checkscan dashboard can be very helpful with that. We're just going to hit clear, because you can simply just type in that resident's last name. And if I was looking for particular May, maybe I would go back to the 1st of April, or you can leave it wide open, but I'm going to show you all the receipts that were created for that resident. And evidently I didn't type in the right resident. There we go. So here I can go back and see I had 2 checks scanned in, one from May 2016 and one I just did 2 days ago. So you can use the Checkscan dashboard, really helpful. All right, so moving on. So we're going to go into the Checkscan interface. Just want to go over a couple of features inside of the Checkscan interface, just making sure we're all on a good page. And then we're going to drift down over to the payments dashboard and talk about exception receipts and failed receipts. So when we click into this batch here, let me find one that's attention required. So when we're on this first screen, we associate this check, we're allowing the $5.55 to be automatically associated either to oldest charge first or to charge code sequence. If you would prefer your end users to see the charges that are being allocated, you're going to want them to click on the color-coded box. It can be red, it can be yellow, it can be green, and they come into the detail page. Here, we're still going to give you the image of the check, but here now we can see $5.50 is going towards cable. We still have a rent charge out there. We can also make notes in here and say that, and those will carry over to the ledger and to that receipt. Also in the detail page, you have the individual receipt here if we needed to change this receipt to a particular date. If your end users are scanning on weekend, but they received the check on Friday, maybe they want to backdate that check to Friday. You have the error function and the warning function. The warnings is a soft warning that you have changed something against the default settings. And then the error is going to gray out the post and report button, so you cannot post your work for those end users. They will need to read the suggestions for the error and then go back to check details and make any corrections. All right, let's close out of Checkscan. Close out of our Checkscan dashboard, and let's look over here underneath exception report, talk a little bit about collect processor. So when you're on your payments dashboard, go ahead and make it a best example. So go ahead and backdate to the first of the month. Now I'm going back a little bit. Whoops, my Voyager got tired. I'm going to backdate a little bit further than like this year because I've got some information that I use for training. I have to go back a little bit further. Maybe March last year. I don't know. So here, underneath the collect processor, this is the interface king that pulls your check scanning and ACH files at 3 p.m. daily. You have your unsent transactions. These items are posted. These items are posted onto the ledger, but they've not been picked up by collect processor. They'll be picked up the next business day at 3 o'clock, or if it was 12 o'clock today, they'd be picked up at 3 o'clock today's time. Right below that is your last collect batch. This is letting you know what collect processor picked up yesterday. Below that is your exception receipt. An exception receipt for Checkscan is an item that has been reversed before the 3 o'clock pull. Let's talk about that. You guys feel free to ask questions on this topic. This is usually where we get a lot of questions. I'm going to try to answer them all. We're going to go talk about a scenario. So the first thing that you need to understand is when a Checkscan batch is posted, it's on the general ledger, it's on collect processor to be pulled at 3 o'clock. If you need to change either the amount of the payment or change who the check has been associated to, I'm going to show you the steps that you can do that. But these steps are in the time frame of before 3 o'clock. The report that you're going to use is the collect processor report. You can get to it right here on this link, or you can get to it on these Checkscan collect processor report. When you come to the report, go ahead and filter for not sent, because we're looking for items that have not been sent to the bank, and click on display. Here we have one. It's for our batch amount is $580. Our collect batch is 0. It's important for you to know why collect batch is 0. The collect batch is 0 because collect processor has not picked up this file. Once it picks up the file, it gives it a numeric number, and it will follow in order. 1 for the first Checkscan batch, 2 for the second Checkscan batch, 3 for the third Checkscan batch. Over to the far right, as we look at these columns, we can see that nothing has been reported back into Voyager. The received count, collect processor hasn't picked up this batch, the sent date's not filled in, and the processors or the bank comes back and now acknowledges the file, and we get the process count and the process amount. We can see those items have not been filled in. When we drill down to the batch count, we know that we have 4 items in this batch. We can see that we've got a multi-tenant receipt, we have a laundry receipt, Ruby and this other person. It's all been associated to these. We have our control numbers. And over to the far right side, underneath collect status, we have in black and white that this has not been sent to the bank. Now, if we needed to make a change at this time, because the file has not been picked up, we would use the collect processor report to reverse those receipts. We could come here. We're going to use the control number. I'm going to use the bottom one first. I'm just going to drill down that control number. I'm going to go ahead and reverse this receipt. Put in your audit trail, whatever that might be, and click save. I'm going to change my post month. My receipt has been reversed. I can close out of that window. And when I come back to the collect processor report and take a good look, I still have the 4 items. I still have the total of 480, but when I refresh my collect processor report, my batch count will automatically drop down to 3, and my number will change to 568 total for the batch count. Now, where is that receipt? Well, it's not on my collect processor report, which is the reason why we wanted it to get it off, because we needed to make a change. So now we have reversed it. Whoops, my fault. When we go back to home and we come back to our exception receipts, that's where that item is going to fall. Now, we still want to make a change to this receipt. Sorry. Here's our receipt. We still want to need to make a change to it, and we also need to rescan the check. Step number 2, once the receipt has been reversed, that's when you can actually delete it out of that batch. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the control number. I'm going to make my life easy. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go to my Checkscan dashboard. Remember, I told you could flip this to details, put in my control number, because it's simply going to just take me directly to that item. I'm not worried about this comment. Remember, it's just a bad reporting error. I'm going to come into this batch. I know it was Dirkwood. I'm going to flag it, and I'm going to click on the folder with the X. Hey, you sure you want to delete? Now, little wording is a little off here. It says all checks. Well, I can't delete all checks. I've only reversed one receipt. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, because it's only going to take out that receipt that I reversed, and now I'm going to delete it. Because now at this point, now this is when I can rescan that check, whether I needed it to reassociate it to a person. Maybe I even wanted to change the check amount. Maybe I signed it to the whole wrong property. Whatever the reason, those are some nice simple steps for you, but use the collect processor report in doing that. And now when we come back to our dashboard and we click refresh, we're back down to the one exception. And this is one of the ones I was using for an ACH example earlier today. That's when you can rescan the check. Any questions about exception receipts or how they get there, why they're there, and how you can get them to release off the dashboard for check scanning? If they are underneath exceptions, step one has been completed, that receipt has been reversed. If you want it to release from the dashboard, you need to delete it from the Checkscan batch. All right, we're going to move right along to our failed receipts and talk about those. Failed receipts are items that are not deposited into your property bank account. Why would we have a failed receipt? Well, one of the most honest answers, or one of the most familiar answers that we have is last four null MICR not found. So here's our failed receipt. I'm going to drill down on it. It's just what you guys should do. Its process failed, meaning that it failed at process stars. Process stars received the file, collect processor sent the file, everything was good, but it got over to the bank and we see there was something wrong with the MICR. It could be as simple as an end user not paying attention and the check was scanned in crooked. The checks have to come in square and clean. It could be as simple as they were fidgeting with the raw MICR line. I mean, I hate to be honest about it, but that is true. It could also, a failed receipt, maybe not with this message, but another type of failed receipt, could be the incorrect document type. So let's make sure that we're choosing correct document types and that we are looking at our monitors so we can avoid, hopefully, not having too many failed receipts. Now, what is important to understand with failed receipts is you want to make sure that you can physically take that check to the bank if needed. So don't shred your checks, and certainly don't stamp them with a void or anything like that, preventing you that you wouldn't be able to physically take those checks to the bank. You have two options with failed receipts. So let's talk about the two options, because you have two options and then you have a step that you need to do to have the failed receipts release off of the dashboard. So option one, you have your failed receipt here. Option one is you can click on that control number and you can choose to reverse this receipt. If you reverse the receipt, it's going to come off of the general ledger, which that's fine. You're going to have to take the check to the bank and then you would create a manual receipt. That's option one. That's a good option. It keeps Voyager very neat and tidy, so to speak. But let's say the bank is really far away and maybe you wait weekly, or maybe you do bi-weekly, just mail your checks all off at the same time, just maybe save money, save energy, or maybe that's your practice with your company. So option two is you can leave this receipt alone. This receipt is posted to this residence ledger, even though it's failed. I believe it's, which one was it? $5. Oh, this one. So it's posted to the ledger, and that's good, but the money's not in the property bank. So you could technically just leave this receipt alone and physically just take the check to the bank to get the manual deposit. Those are the two options. Either way, you have to take the check to the bank. You cannot rescan it. It will come up as a check already exists. What option do you guys like before I go to the next step that needs to take place? Because the next step is Well, I want the failed receipt to come off my dashboard. Reversing it does not release it from the dashboard. Reversing it just takes it off of the general ledger. You guys give me a couple of answers. What options, what do you guys like for your practices? Are you going to reverse, take the check to the bank, create a manual receipt, or are you just going to leave the receipt alone and take the check to the bank? So while you guys think about that, the tool that you're going to need to get the failed receipts to fall off of the dashboard is called our, underneath admin utilities, reconcile collect batch. I'm going to open up my admin utilities. I'm going to open up reconcile collect batch. You're going to find the batch that failed. And if you're wondering where this number came from, which I hope that you are, it's on the collect processor report. And it's letting you know it's right here. So here's this receipt here that we're dealing with. It's collect batch number 2. It's also going to show up on the dashboard where you saw the failed receipt. What I feel like is a good practice is you can know the collect batch number, but I go ahead and grab this profit stars reference number so that if I ever need any research, I have that profit stars reference number. It's going to be tied back in Voyager for me to have that. So we're going to go to admin utilities, reconcile collect batch, find my collect batch number 2, copy and paste that profit stars reference number. That's a good suggestion. You don't have to. The note trail here is not required. I'm just telling you some of the best practice. Maybe you want to put in the control number or the T code, but before you make a full decision on that, you can go ahead and let me show you what happens. We know that it's a Checkscan file, so do Checkscan. Once you click submit, you're going to see the item that failed, and then you're going to reconcile. Once you reconcile it, that's when it falls off of the dashboard, and you come back to failed receipts, and it shows as 0. That's one thing that happens when you reconcile. The second item is on that collect processor report. You can filter this by failed and reconciled. Now the line item is no longer red, it shows in black. And over to the far right side, you get your reconcile notes. This is what you put in that note filter. Like I said, I kind of just show like you can do some really good audit trail here. You got the profit stars reference number, which I find very helpful at times, especially when you're new. Put the error message in there so you can see that it has been reconciled. And then when you drill down into the batch count itself, sorry, I do have double screens. But over to the right side, now you've got a reconciled date of when that item was reconciled. So I got a couple of clients who said they're actually going to reverse, take the check to the bank, and then re-enter a manual receipt. So that's good. That's a nice, clean way to do it. Okay. Another question came in. Can the micro line be manually or microline, depending on what side of the world you're from, manually be corrected? Corrected and being rescanned? The answer to that is no. Rescanning being the big bold print word there. But can it be manually configured or entered? Yes. So let's go into the Checkscan batch. And right here. So this check did not do what we call a clean scan. I'm not saying that it's dirty. I'm using that word as the micro line C was not read. It's asking you for all this information. So you can, what our best judgment is to go ahead and rescan this check, rescan it at this point right now. Delete it out of the batch by flagging this button and clicking save and just deleting that item. and then given it a chance to scan in a much clearer version. But if not, you would just go through the format of entering this information in, transit number, and then you would click save. So you can go through that way for MICR information. So that's for failed receipts. NSFs and other returns are a little different. Once you handle that NSF item or that other return item, it automatically comes off of the dashboard automatically for you. When you happen to have a NSF or other returned item, you're also going to have an update type or the return code. For example, here we have an S, and I'm looking right here on my screen, and S is just letting you know that it's refer to maker. Checks that are returned with the RTM stamp require a depositor to contact that maker of the check. Refer to maker means that you need to contact the person that wrote the check to find out why it was returned. If the resident isn't sure why it was returned, then they would need to contact their own bank to find out why it was returned. If you saw the letter C here, that would indicate a stop payment. Your NSFs and other return items should be handled on a regular daily basis by making sure you always backdate your dashboard and making sure that those items are being handled. When you have other returns or NSF items, you will also should be receiving, if you're using Profit Stars, an NSF notification. It's going to look very similar to this, where you get the bank account that the NSF happens, a reference number, which is that same reference number that shows up on the dashboard, a transaction date, a dollar amount, and whether it's an other returned item, which is the below line, or if it's a Check 21 return. Now take a big note here. This is just a notification. This is not telling you that resident T code or John Johnson or unit number or Social Security or anything. It's just very generic. It's a nice, soft, friendly reminder of the next business day after you receive the email to go ahead, log into Voyager, and check for the NSF and go ahead and handle it. You will also need to reach out to the resident and let them know that they had an NSF. Adjusted items. Adjusted items are Check 21 adjustments. If you are scanning in lots and lots of money orders, and that money orders where we see this happen a lot is why I pick on money orders. It can happen for any document type. When the system doesn't read the check amount, it does one or two things. It reads the check amount or it leaves it at zero. When it leaves that check amount at zero, it's up to that end user to make sure they enter the check amount correctly, 100%. If they don't enter that check amount correctly, it's a Check 21 adjustment. Those adjustments are a $40 fee. We can get some transaction details on those adjustments. They also report back to you on the dashboard underneath adjusted items when the money has physically been moved. They can happen either which way. They can happen the positive or the negative. If the check amount was $500 and it was entered in as 50, you're $450 short. So you would need a Check 21 adjustment of a deposit for $450. Once that money's been deposited into your bank, that receipt will come back underneath adjusted items. You would handle that receipt here. You would click on that receipt, you would reverse it. That will let it release off of the dashboard or fall off of the dashboard. You would create the manual receipt for the $500 for that tenant. Same as if it was the other way around. Expired and future transactions. This is not something that we're seeing a lot, but since it's on the dashboard, let me just give you a brief synopsis of what that is. Collect processor has a security setting that only pulls items within a 14-day window. But this is on the post date, so not the receipt date. So you can backdate receipts, you can push receipts onto the receipt date into the future, but be careful of that because of late fees. So this is on the post date. But if you happen to run into expired or future transactions, you're just going to simply reverse them, delete them all out of the batch, and then you would rescan them with a more current date. All right, a couple of fun tools that you might like to be aware of, and they're underneath the admin utilities. The first one that I want to discuss is resident EFT cleanup. How many of us have scanned in a check and associated it to the wrong tenant? I have. I did. I didn't mean to. It was a mistake. What EFT account cleanup is for is you have a personal check and it was assigned to my good friend. Oh, I put it in the wrong block here. Derek, that's who I seem to pick on all the time. And I have assigned it to this person, to Derek, but it really shouldn't. It should really go to Joseph. If I click on delete, it's simply, I'm not deleting out any check information. I'm simply telling the system of this transit and account number should not be associated to Mr. Dirkwood. It should be associated to Sean. And then the next time I rescan in that personal check, it's going to come up as a red box so that the end user would associate to the correct person, and then that information will be saved underneath Sean. So that's a nice, good tool to have. Now, if for some reason that resident has an automatic payment set up, it's going to notify you that that resident does have an automatic payment. When you're in Checkscan, another tool, sometimes when you're on the dashboard and you select a Checkscan batch and you put in the batch number right here and you click on submit and you get scanning in progress. Sometimes that can happen. When your end users don't click the save button and they just kind of X out of Checkscan, the system isn't sure that it actually closed down. It's like the internet got confused there, honestly. So underneath admin utilities, we have reset Checkscan batches. This is also really nice. It has two functions here. We can change it from ready to post back to attention required. And then you can also, if it's stuck in scanning in progress, then you can change it back to attention required to get back into that batch for yourself. And you would simply just come in here, scanning in progress is the current status. You would put in that batch number 2, and then click on submit, and it would show you, I don't have an example of that right now, but it would show you those batches, and you would simply click on those batches and click save and turn them back to attention required. If it was at ready to post and you needed to make a modification or you needed to make an edit, you would change the status to ready to post, flag your batch, and click save, because your new status is going to be attention required. All right, a couple of fun reports. I call them fun. I think it's always nice to know you don't have to change roles and get out of different things when you're looking for items. Underneath the side menu, you have some reports. You have registers. Whoopsie. You have a transaction register. The one here is, I was looking for reverse receipt. I had my receipt right there. We could probably take this one out. Let's see, in the notes, let's try % rev leave it on receipt, and then go over to the right side and let's click display. And here we can just see, because I put in the note filter here, %, REV, %, I have reversed. I can see all my reverse. It even shows you the program reversed. But you can use other filters to bear down. Maybe you're looking for a particular bank account, or even the period or the date created. Also underneath registers, we have the NSF register. So as I said, when you NSF those items, they automatically fall off of the dashboard. You have an NSF register that will show you the NSF. We also have a collect services return report now. I don't have any data underneath this one, but what's really nice is it also shows you with those adjustments. So you can see the columns at the top. You have the file type. It could be ACH or it could be X9. This class is for X9. Your collect batch, the bank, the property, the tenant, and the receipt status, has it been NSF'd or not? And of course the reason. And you might be saying, hey, what was that one again? It's the collect services return report with adjustments. That's a really nice report as well. All right, I got a few more things to show you, and then we can look at some maker information. So this last report is underneath your SQL report, so it does have to be dropped in by an account manager. It's also is the longest report name I know that's ever out there. It's at the very bottom. And it's Yardi support, Checkscan number, and Micker update by control number. Is that not the longest report name you've ever heard? So, needless to say, with that, what is the function? Well, when you use this report, when you're in Checkscan, and your end users are scanning checks, and they come to this tab at the bottom left that says check already exists. And let's say it's a MoneyGram with that 90 in the Micker information. And they know it's not a check that was already existed. This would be a time that you could use that report. How do you use the report? Well, number one, you need to know the control number of the posted receipt. So you need to know the control number of the posted receipt. Report only, yes. What was the true check number? It wasn't 90, it was 054. We'll click submit. Is this the right item? Is this the right routing and account number? If this is all correct, then you go ahead and you use your back button and you would hit report only no. And then when you change it, you click on submit. It's not changing anything on the receipt. This is what you need to understand. It's not changing anything on the receipt. When you go into Voyager, you receive the receipt, you're not going to see this new check number 054, but in the Checkscan tables, it has been changed. So when you go scan in that check, it will allow you to scan that check in without being a duplicate. Be very cautious of this report. It is not something that you want to just give to anybody. It's purposely used when that check number has been tied in with the, kind of like a Micker line that wasn't read correctly. We can also see this a lot when we come into dual Micker interpretations. So for this example here, when we look at this bank setup, oh, it's not going to get to me. But actually, see how this 981, this is dual Micker interpretation. The system was before this receipt was posted, before this check was posted, it was asking me, was 021 my check number or was 918? And if I would have chose 918 and then I scanned in this check again, with a different check number, it would be reading it as 918, even though it was a brand new check. So just be cautious of using that particular report. Troubleshooting steps. So we looked on the credit card dashboard where we had a report wording about an incorrect bank that didn't have anything to do with anything. Everything was good. But if you happen to be in the Checkscan interface and you see this message, no bank assigned to the property may not deposit, that is a problem. That means that that bank account has not been synced with our collect processor team. So that is not an error, or not an error that you can overlook or that you can still post. There is a problem with this. All right, any questions so far? We're going to jump into our MICR character recognition, magnetic ink character recognition. This is a good little screenshot. This is kind of how we look at our raw MICR information in Checkscan for personal checks, commercial checks, money orders, cashier's checks, and bill pay, and how the MICR line should be read. First off, you've got these symbols. So when you see that last four null, we're usually, or not we, that printer of the check is missing that on us symbol, this second one. Usually when we see that, I also said it could be a slanted check or a crooked check. That's true too, but this is that on us symbol that we could be missing. Our document types that we support, bill pays. And what's nice about the banking industry is they actually print that at the top screen here. You'll see online bill pay, letting you know it's a third-party company presenting that check for that resident. They should not be assigned as commercial. They should be designated as the online bill pay document type. Cashier's check. If your residents are cash equivalent, they would supply a cashier's check or maybe a money order to pay their rent. Any questions? All right. Well, I almost kept my promise. Got done a little bit early. You guys have been a great class. Thank you so much for joining. I'll stay online just for a couple of minutes for a few more questions if needed. Debbie, I got you. Lynn, I will jump right back over there. Give me just a second. I know it's a nice little friendly cheat sheet, isn't it? It's pretty nice. And I'm not saying it's 100% or that it's foolproof, but it definitely can be helpful with check scanning. But hopefully the system will simply just read your checks, hopefully without any problems. So I like to show at least a few troubleshooting tips. Hopefully they can be helpful for you guys. I think this is the one that you were looking for. And in the dropouts, you can tell I've been talking for a few hours today. In the handout section, you have the admin utility reconcile collect batch instructions. You've got payment processing user guide, and you have the payments dashboard and admin utilities. Just a nice definition. I think those are three really, really helpful. So feel free to go ahead and download those. You guys have been a great group, and on behalf of Yardi Systems, we appreciate your business. And I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll stay on the line so you guys can download those. Otherwise, take care. Thank you so much for participating, and I'll see you on the next webinar.